you are talking about human nature as though there is an objective reality, and there are many people who simply don't believe that, which gets us to transhumanism. I mean, there are really people who are convinced that there is no limit to what we might become. And it seems like what you're saying is they try again and again, whether it's with the pill or with the idea of an artificial womb, that they keep trying and it keeps coming back. There's, it's like betting against the house. You always lose, but they keep trying. That's my expectation. They will keep trying, and it's going to suck. But they're betting against the house. Yeah. I can't prove it. We're going to find out the hard way. We can jump up and down and say, well, don't do this because you're just going to create monsters and then we'll just end up with human nature again. But nobody's going to listen to me. I'm just some woman who lives in a cupboard full of books. Nobody's going to pay any attention to me. So we're going to find out the hard way. But, it'll be 50 years into trying to become superhumans, or, trying to optimize humans for 250 IQ, we'll realize that actually that was catastrophic in some other way, that we just hadn't banked on because we weren't looking at the integrity and the totality of the human organism. Well, so what do you think it is about the nature of reality, or the nature of human nature, speaking objectively, that works against these things? Why is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein prophetic? What is it about we humans? It's funny, I was, for the longest time, I thought maybe my 10-year project should be to try and figure out a way to talk about human nature without having to go via the Church Fathers. Because, it seems like the most direct route is to go via the Church Fathers. But you can't really do that you can't really do that now because people just won't listen. If you start throwing Thomas Aquinas at people, and right, they'll just walk out. Yeah. The moment you quote Thomas Aquinas, you've lost. Even I would walk out. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. And you're not even joking. So you have to find something. You have to find some other way of getting there. Yeah. Otherwise, people are just going to tune out. So I thought, well, is this a worthwhile project? And I've actually come to think, no, this is a stupid waste of my time. Because actually, I shouldn't need to make the case for human nature, because all you have to do is open your eyes. And actually, the more interesting question is, what does it mean to open your eyes? What does it mean to be looking such that you can see it? And the more I've thought about this, the more I've thought that actually the important thing that we need to be leaning into is not trying to make an intellectual case for something which is just right there under our noses. It's making an experiential case, perhaps even, for seeing the world through the lens of pattern recognition rather than through the lens of analytic, dissecting analysis. Because it's not possible to see human nature in an analytic frame. Because if you're chopping things into ever smaller pieces and trying to fix things into ever neater boxes, you can't see something which is only perceptible through time. And you can't see something which is perceptible as an integrated organism within a system and in relational terms. Well, you're making some assumptions there, which I agree with, but you can understand how some people simply don't think of it that way. In other words, if you think of a human being as something, a walking poem, created in the image of God, something eternal, or so, however you do it, that's different than saying you're just an aggregate of chemicals and, you come and go, and that there's nothing transcendent or fixed or pointing beyond ourselves. And there are many people who have that materialist view. It's a little bit bleak, but that those people, they don't, in other words, why would they want to think holistically? Why would they want to think in the way that you've described? Well, I'm probably not going to be able to persuade those people to think holistically. That's chances are that's just not going to happen. But we'll go down that road, and it will end in ecocide, and then whatever human civilization comes out the other side of that won't think like that anymore, because by definition it will have had to not think like that in order to survive. So it's not a very upbeat. In the long term, it's not upbeat. Even slightly upbeat. No. But you've got to take the long view. You've got to take the long view. If you take the long view, it's upbeat. In every other respect, it's deeply doomerish. I accept that. But we do have to get to the Ponzi scheme. Yeah, I mean, okay, so within the technological order, within the cyborg order,
in which we find ourselves now.
There are, I mean, the incredible thing again about human nature is that notwithstanding all the pressures on women to think of ourselves as fungible work units, to think of ourselves as indistinguishable from men, as just disembodied consciousnesses piloting a meat suit and driving a spreadsheet and whatever. Despite all of those pressures, there are still a great, the majority of women, more women than not, still want kids. If that doesn't speak to the reality and the enduring power of our nature, I don't know what does. So here we are, and this more women than not still want kids. I mean, let's not get into birth rates because that's a whole other can of worms. But lots of women are still having kids, and yet this is not a world which is very welcoming to mothers with dependent infants. I mean, anecdotally, I've got a friend who works in perinatal mental health support, and she tells me that without fail, it's the mothers who believe that nothing will change for them after they have a baby who are the most likely to experience postpartum depression, without fail, because they're not prepared for how much it does change you, and they're not prepared for how utterly it pulls apart the liberal relation you have to reality. This idea that you can be that it's good to be free and unencumbered and an atomized subject. And the experience of caring for a child and the experience of being needed so fundamentally by something so dependent and whom you would give your life for in almost all cases is so radically at odds with that paradigm that it just melts your brain. And those women who are least prepared for it are the ones who struggle the hardest. This is just consistently the case. So here you are. You've despite all of the transhumanist urges to become the homunculus piloting a meat suit, here you are with this dependent infant, and you've got to try and square that circle. And a lot of women square that circle by saying, well, either through economic pressure or through whatever other thought processes they go through, saying, fine, well, I've got to go back to work. Either because they want to, because they love their job, or because they have to, because otherwise the house is going to get repossessed, one way or another. Most women end up. At which point, somebody's still got to look after the baby, because the nature of a baby has not changed any more than our nature as women has changed. You can't just leave an 8-month-old baby to fend for itself in the house all day. Somebody's got to look after it. Who's that going to be? Inevitably, it ends up being other women. So what you end up with in practice, in order to emancipate women from the basic givens of motherhood and the basic, the needs of a dependent child, are that you simply outsource the caring, the caring aspect of the work that you're doing to somebody else,
to another woman, always.
And it is almost without fail another woman.
Yeah.
And it's usually, but more often than not, it'll be someone poorer, or it'll be a racial minority, or it'll be some other woman who's in a less fortunate, and then she's got to figure out what to do with her kid.
So has anyone besides you ever pointed this out? Because when I read this,
actually, yes, there's a Nancy Fraser, who is a very much more left-wing thinker than I am. She and two others whose names escape me right now wrote a book called Feminism for the 99%, which is feminism. And she points out that the Sheryl Sandbergs of this world are able to lean in because actually what they're doing is leaning on all of those other women all the way down the Ponzi scheme who are doing the work.
Right. So it's women taking advantage of other women without saying so, or pretending not to be doing that. No?
I mean, to be clear, I'm not going to throw brickbats at any woman for the choices that she has to make, because 9 times out of 10, you'll find that women are acutely ambivalent about the choice. Most mothers with little babies in childcare feel very conflicted about it. And it's very difficult to figure out what to do in the world as it is, without feeling as though somebody is pointing a finger at you and saying you're doing it wrong. And I don't want to be one of those women who's saying, hey, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. Because I mean, if you stay home with your kids, somebody's going to point the finger at you and say, you're letting the side down, or you're just lazing around, or you're just wrong in some other way. Yeah. A woman's place is not in the home. A woman's place is in the wrong. And I don't want to join that chorus, but I think there are
Well,
structural
you're doing the
forces
opposite of joining that chorus. I think you're giving hope to the women who find themselves maybe wanting to stay home. You are saying to them, yes, it's not a crazy idea.
I don't think it is a crazy idea. And but what I should also say to that is that it's a luxury now to be able to stay home. You know, the world as it is now makes stay-at-home mums a luxury good. It perhaps wasn't the case when I was a kid. Yeah, I mean, I had a fairly average middle-class upbringing, and we were able to raise a family on one income. That's almost never the case now, unless you're incredibly well off. So the reality is, for most families, that both parents have to work to some degree or another. And in that context, I'm very hesitant to point the finger at mothers and say you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Anytime a woman in her early 20s asks me, you know, how do you think I should plan ahead, because I really want to be a mum?
Yeah.
I say, well, okay, so you should probably be looking for a line of work professionally which is maximally portable and which you can do at least to some extent from home. You know, don't look for a job which keeps you for long hours out of the home. Look for something you can do from home. Look for something you can do flexibly. You can scale up or scale down depending on the needs of your family. And that way, chances are you'll be able to exist in public. You'll be able to contribute to the household expenses, and you also won't miss your children growing up. So, you know, those are I mean, this is the woman I know who's maximally nailed work-life balance is actually my hairdresser. She works out of her garage. She's got a perfectly sized miniature studio in her garage. Yeah. You know, and even with like the little Biscoff biscuits and the cappuccino machine, it's just perfect. And she's a great hairdresser, and it's all there. And she has two lovely daughters. She works around school hours. Her mum lives nearby. Her husband also works from home. She's nailed it. She contributes to the household. You know, they're both equal. Economically, they're both active. But what they've done in a very 21st century way is recreate the productive household from before the industrial era. That I think is absolutely crucial. And you know, of course, there are some lines of work where you can't do that. But anytime anyone asks me, I say that's the holy grail. Yeah. If you can recreate the productive household, as where both parents are doing some kind of work in conjunction with child caring in a way which allows at least a bit of flexibility, then you have a shot at a family life as well as kids.
We only have a few minutes left. I wanted to touch a little bit more on transhumanism, or maybe you can just say some things about AI. We were talking earlier and you had some thoughts, but I'll leave it up to you.
Oh, I don't know. You get lots of hype in the press about how, you know, we're going to end up with some kind of super intelligent computer.
I have to say, just bluntly, I think AI is mostly nonsense. In other words, this idea that, you know, first of all, it's artificial intelligence, which is to say it's artificial. It's just computing on another level.
Right.
And human beings,
it's a very fancy autocorrect.
Well, you've said that before, and I'm glad you said it now. It's a very fancy autocorrect. That's all it is. It's a technology. It's not. We're not creating machines that can evolve consciousness. But people act as though, because they don't believe in human nature, they seem to think that anything can happen and machines can get so smart that they can have consciousness and supplant us, which is a little silly.
No, that's just silly. Which is not to say it won't have transformative effects. Indeed, it is already having transformative effects. I mean, there are some corners of, for example, in business research, in business sector research, where people who are adept with it, data scientists who are good with AI, can do in days what a researcher might previously have taken weeks to do, because they just know how to get the AI to do the basic work for them. Mm-hmm. But then what you then need is the human input at the end to do the sense checking, and I think that serves as a template for both where the threat lies with AI. Which is to say it's not going to turn us all into paperclips and take over the world. But what it will do is displace a lot of living, breathing human beings with families who depend on them from lines of work that they've been engaged in possibly for decades, and at a point where they may or may not be able to reskill. because it's just able to do certain very limited types of pattern recognition quicker and more effectively than a human could. So there is a real threat there, much the same way as automated checkout machines replace cashiers up to a point, but then you still need. But then, what you get instead of the people doing either putting packets through a scanner or counting ships or whatever you happen to be doing, you end up with people whose job it is to debug. So you've got the sense checker at the end who's going through the report and saying, well, does this actually make sense? Does this stack up? I need to check the database and make sure the robot hasn't done something idiotic. And in the same way in the supermarket, you've got the one person who's replaced 10 cashiers, whose job it is to press the button when invariably the machine says unexpected item in bagging area or some other stupid thing that's driving everybody crazy. So the human input is maybe reduced, but it's not non-existent, and it's new kinds of input, which is in the form of sense checking and debugging. And I think this is something which I've reflected on as a writer a great deal, because there's a lot of kinds of writing which are rendered obsolete by AI. The kind of tedious commercial copywriting grunt work which I was rubbish at for years and years and years is increasingly obsolete, because you really can just get robots to do it. And let's face it, a lot of it will probably be better for that, or at least it's not going to be any worse. Mm-hmm. But there are also kinds of writing and kinds of there's kinds of reading and writing that the robot self-evidently can't do, because they're just going to regurgitate garbage, and that's very much more like a kind of sense checking and a kind of sense making. And one of the phenomena, really, I think what figures such as you, Eric, do. Is to aggregate streams of information and the thoughts and reflections and commentaries that go on, that to try and make sense of this very bewildering world that we live in now, and to distill that into a form which is then welcomed by an audience of people who'll say, well, thank God somebody's done that for me, because I don't have time to do this myself, and yet I need to understand this.
So then maybe I will continue to have a job.
I don't think, Eric, come on.
Conclusion,
yes. Conclusion, no, the robot is not going to put you out of business, Eric. I think you knew that.
I think I did. I think I did.
You knew that.
I think I did.